You have reached a strange interval in your life where the most decisive thing you are doing looks, from the outside, like doing nothing. You are not explaining, you are not clarifying, you are not smoothing the atmosphere, you are not repairing the mood in the room, and this absence has become a presence so heavy that other people can feel it before you speak. You have noticed it in the way conversations stall as soon as you enter, in the way someone's smile comes too quickly and dies too early, in the way a question is asked with the wrong tenderness, as if it were a key trying to imitate the shape of a lock it no longer fits. Your silence is not a strategy, it is not a performance. It is the aftersound of an inner event that has already occurred. The way the air changes after a lightning strike, even if no one saw the flash. There is a particular calm that arrives when a person stops offering their inner life as public property. It is not the calm of being at peace. It is the calm of a door that has been shut from the inside and cannot be forced open without breaking the frame. You may still speak, you may still be polite, you may still do what must be done, yet something in you is no longer readable in the old way. The faces around you keep searching for the familiar signals your guilt reflects, your quick repair, your apology that arrives before anyone names the offense, your little laugh that reassures them you are still available. But those signals do not appear, and so the room grows uneasy, because the room has been living on access. This is what few people admit. A great portion of what is called closeness is not love at all, but permission, permission to reach into you, permission to interpret you, permission to take your emotional weather and use it as a forecast for their own safety. They were accustomed to the fact that you were legible. You were the kind of person who could be read. Your eyes would soften at the right moment. Your voice would betray your hesitation. Your body would offer a small tremor of shame that let them know they still had influence. The old power did not need to be violent. It only needed to be continuous. It needed your predictability, because predictability is a kind of leash. Now, something has happened in you that has severed that leash without any dramatic announcement. You are not cold. That word is the desperate vocabulary of someone whose hand has touched a boundary and found it solid. What they feel as coldness is simply the end of emotional access. The same message that used to pass easily into you through pity, through obligation, through the old fear of being misunderstood, now hits a wall and returns to them unchanged. And because they have lived by transmitting themselves into you, your refusal to receive feels to them like abandonment. But what it truly reveals is that the relationship had been organized around a hidden contract. You will remain accessible, and in return you will be allowed to belong. So you begin to witness a strange theater. People try different doors. One day they are sweet, another day they are offended, another day they are worried about you, another day they speak about you to others, just loud enough for you to feel it. They attempt flattery, then guilt, then moral superiority, then sudden intimacy, then sudden distance. Each approach is a key, and you, without intending to, have become a lock that has changed its shape. This is why their efforts escalate. They are not responding to your words, they are responding to the fact that their usual instruments no longer work. And when the instruments fail, what emerges from them is not always their best self. what emerges is their shadow reaction, the hidden rage, the panic, the contempt, the accusation that they cannot bear to recognize as their own. You may have wondered why your quietness provokes such intensity, because your quietness removes the stage lighting. When you stop reacting, you stop feeding the drama that allows another person to avoid themselves. A reaction from you defending, explaining, apologizing, crying, pleading was never only about you. It was often a way for them to discharge their own unbearable feelings into your body. They could provoke, and you would carry the atmosphere. They could complain, and you would metabolize it. They could blame, and you would search for your fault. Your inner life was the place where their disorder could be placed and disguised as relationship. Now the place is closed, and so their disorder remains with them, naked, restless, and humiliating. Observe the subtle cruelty that appears in these moments. People begin to treat you as if you owe them your readability. They speak as if your internal world is a service they have purchased. They say, "What's wrong with you?" when nothing is wrong except that you are no longer available for extraction. They say, "You've changed," as if change were a crime and not the most natural movement of the psyche. They say, "You think you're better," because the ego can only interpret a boundary as arrogance when it was accustomed to your submission. The old power depended on your self-doubt. It depended on you being slightly ashamed of your own perception. For you see, the danger of seeing what others don't is that you become difficult to govern. To see what others don't is not a supernatural gift. It is often a consequence of suffering. When you have been forced to read moods for survival, you learn the language of micro-signals. You learn to hear the tension behind the laughter. You learn to sense the hidden bargain inside a compliment. You learn when affection is being used as a hook. And because you can see these things, people experience you as too sensitive or overthinking, which is a convenient way for them to keep their own motives in the dark. But your perception does not disappear simply because it is inconvenient. It accumulates, and one day it reaches a threshold. It becomes an inner fact, and from that day onward, you cannot return to the earlier innocence without splitting yourself in two. This is where the danger truly begins, not for you, but for the structures built around your unconscious compliance. The old order relied on your blindness at specific moments. It relied on you not naming what you noticed. It relied on you translating your instincts into politeness. It relied on you staying in the persona that kept the group comfortable, the understanding one, the forgiving one, the one who can be counted on to absorb tension and smooth the social fabric. That persona is not a lie. It was once necessary. But when a persona becomes compulsory, it becomes a prison. And you have reached the moment where the prison door no longer convinces you it is a door. You feel this in your body. It is not merely a thought. There is a different quality in your breath now, less pleading, less shallow. There is a stillness in your jaw, where you used to clench in preparation for explaining yourself. There is a strange fatigue that lifts, not because life is easy, but because you have stopped performing emotional labor as a form of safety. This is why people around you can sense something has changed, even when you say nothing. The psyche announces itself through posture, timing, gas, and the absence of urgency, when you no longer rush to repair the emotional atmosphere, you become unnerving to those who depended on that repair to avoid their own inner work. In such a time, dreams often speak with a bluntness that waking language cannot afford. Perhaps you have had a dream like this. You are in a familiar house, but the corridors do not align. A hallway that should lead to the kitchen leads instead to a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The rooms are furnished as they always were, yet each door you open reveals something wrong. An empty room where a family should be, a mirror that reflects a stranger, a locked door where there used to be an open passage. In the dream, you feel the urgency of being watched. You hear footsteps behind you, not fast but certain. You try to explain to someone in the dream what has happened, but your voice will not come. You point, you gesture, you open your mouth, and nothing arrives. And then you notice, with a shock that is also relief, that the door at the end of the corridor has a lock on the inside. This dream does not require your optimism. It requires your honesty. The house is your psychic structure, the familiar arrangement of roles, relationships, and reflexes. The misaligned corridors are the sign that the old map no longer matches the living reality. The locked inner door is the psyche declaring a new boundary, not as a preference but as architecture. The mirror that reflects a stranger is the moment the persona fails. You can no longer recognize yourself in the role you once inhabited. And the footsteps behind you are the pressure of the collective family. Friends, partners, colleagues approaching the place where you used to yield. The fact that your voice will not come is not weakness. It is the unconscious refusing to provide energy to a contract that has expired. Symbols gather around you now because you are living at the level where symbols become more accurate than explanations. The mirror becomes important. A mirror is not simply reflection, it is confrontation. In ordinary life, people want you to be a mirror. For them, reflect their goodness, their suffering, their narrative of being right. You once provided this reflexively by understanding them quickly, by validating them, by offering your emotional intelligence as a soft surface they could press against. But now the mirror has turned. You are no longer reflecting them. You are reflecting yourself, and this reversal is intolerable to those who used your reflection as proof of their innocence. Then there is the labyrinth. A labyrinth is what you enter when the straightforward path of social harmony is no longer possible without self-betrayal. In the labyrinth, there are no direct routes. There are only turns, delays, and the necessity of facing what you avoided. People who live by simple narratives despise the labyrinth. They call it complicated. They accuse you of making things difficult. But the labyrinth is not your invention. It is the shape of the psyche when the unconscious has begun to demand truth. Your withdrawal is not confusion. It is the psyche guiding you deeper, where cheap clarity cannot survive. And there is the locked door. The locked door is the end of the old economy of access. When access was open, power could be exercised softly through implication. A sigh could control you, a disappointed tone could govern you, a minor coldness could summon you back into service. The locked door ends this. It forces the other person to confront an intolerable fact: they do not own your inner world. Many will experience this not as a boundary but as an insult. They will try to pick the lock with stories about how you are unkind, how you are selfish, how you are broken, how you are going through something. These stories are attempts to regain authority over your identity. If they can define you, they can re-enter you, but the locked door is not persuaded by definition. What you are watching, then, is the collapse of an old power structure that did not declare itself as power. It declared itself as care, as concern, as loyalty, as family, as friendship, as love. And perhaps there was love within it, but love had been entangled with an unconscious contract. The contract said, you will remain the one who understands, the one who absorbs, the one who keeps the peace, the one who stays readable. In return, you will not be exiled. Your belonging depended on your availability. Now the contract has been broken, not by argument, but by an inner development that has already completed. This is why others panic. Panic is what happens when an unconscious system senses it is losing its anchor. You were an anchor for many people, not because you were strong in the obvious way, but because you were emotionally consistent. You were interpretable. You could be predicted and therefore used as a stabilizing point. When you withdraw that function, their own instability surfaces. They do not say, I feel unstable in myself. They say, you are acting strange. They locate their inner disturbance in your behavior, because projection is always simpler than self-knowledge, and the sharper your perception becomes, the more fiercely they project, because your perception threatens to name what they are desperate to keep unnamed. To see what others don't is to become dangerous. In a specific way, you no longer provide the unconscious cover that allows them to remain asleep. You see the small manipulations, the emotional bargaining, the hidden resentments dressed as jokes, the tenderness offered as a leash, the morality used as a weapon. And when you stop reacting, you stop participating in the shared fiction that these things are not happening. Your very stillness becomes an accusation without words, not because you are accusing them, but because the psyche inside them hears the truth in the silence and calls it an enemy. So your relationships begin to reorganize around absence. People speak less directly to you and more about you. They check on you with a curiosity that feels like surveillance. They attempt to provoke a reaction as proof that you are still accessible. They test you with small disappointments. They punish you with distance. They offer sudden warmth and then withdraw it, hoping to awaken the old hunger in you for repair. But the hunger does not come, or if it comes, it is seen for what it is, an old reflex, not a true need. And this is when the old power truly collapses, when the lever no longer finds its mechanism. If you are honest, you can feel the difference between loneliness and this state. Loneliness is a longing. This is an ending. Loneliness searches outward. This search is inward. It is not bright. It is not comforting. It is a dangerous calm. And it is dangerous precisely because it cannot be negotiated with in the old way. Your boundary is no longer a decision you make each day. It has become a structure that your psyche inhabits. Others can sense that it is not up for discussion, and this is why they behave as if something sacred has been taken from them. What has been taken is not your love. What has been taken is their access to your guilt. And now, in the quiet after this inner event, you begin to recognize the simplest and most unsettling truth. You are not becoming someone else. You are becoming someone you can no longer abandon. There is a second layer beneath what you are witnessing now, and it is colder, more exacting. The first shock belongs to others, their confusion, their agitation, their sudden awkwardness around you. The second shock belongs to you, and it arrives more quietly. It is the realization that the bond you thought was mutual was, in many cases, asymmetrical. You were not simply relating, you were stabilizing. You were not merely listening, you were absorbing, and when that function ceased, the relationship did not adapt, it destabilized. This is the moment when sentiment falls away and structure reveals itself. You begin to notice that some people do not miss you. They miss what you did for their inner balance. They do not ask about your inner life. They circle it, as if looking for a seam. Their questions are shaped not by curiosity but by a need to restore an old arrangement. They speak in the conditional tense, if only you would. It used to be, we were fine before, as though the past were a legitimate authority over the present. What disturbs them is not your silence, but its irreversibility. Silence that can be broken is tolerable. Silence that has become native to you is not. This is where the psychology sharpens. The human psyche, when deprived of access, does not become neutral. It becomes imaginative. It fills the gap with stories. And the stories it chooses are not random. They are drawn from the shadow. When someone cannot reach you, they begin to describe you in a way that preserves their innocence. You are labeled distant, arrogant, unstable, selfish, cold. These labels are not diagnoses, they are defenses. Each one is an attempt to relocate the disturbance outside the self. If you are cold, then they are not rejected, they are victims. If you are unstable, then their anxiety is concern. If you are selfish, then their dependency becomes virtue. Notice how quickly moral language appears when access is threatened. Morality is often recruited as a crowbar. The unspoken message is simple. If you were good, you would still be open. If you were loving, you would still explain. If you were healthy, you would still soften. But morality here is not ethical reflection. It is a control mechanism that has lost its grip and is now tightening in panic. The psyche that depends on your availability will always frame your boundary as a failure of character rather than a shift of structure. At this depth, anger begins to surface not as explosion, but as density. It is an anger that does not seek expression. It does not want to be discharged into words or action. It wants to be acknowledged as a fact. This anger has always been present, but it was split off, buried beneath accommodation and reasonableness. It lived in the shadow because it contradicted the image you were allowed to have of yourself: patient, understanding, generous, safe. Yet this anger is not pathological. It is the guardian of the psyche's limits. When it is repressed, the psyche compensates by dissolving boundaries. When it is integrated, Boundaries cease to be a matter of effort. This is why you are not trying to hold your ground now. There is nothing to hold. The ground is there. What others experience as your withdrawal is, in truth, your anger having found its rightful place, not as behavior, but as structure. The integrated anger does not shout, it does not threaten, it simply makes certain movements impossible. It prevents you from explaining yourself to people who are not listening. It prevents you from repairing bonds that were sustained by your self-erasure. It prevents you from reopening doors that lead only to familiar diminishment. In this state, a second dream often appears, quieter and more unsettling than the first. You find yourself standing before a mirror in a darkened room. The mirror is old, its surface uneven. As you look into it, the reflection does not immediately move with you. There is a delay. You raise your hand, the reflection follows a moment later. When you speak, the mouth in the mirror opens, but no sound emerges. And then, slowly, the reflection turns its back to you and walks away, leaving you facing an empty surface that still feels watched. This dream is not about loss, it is about separation. The delayed reflection is the persona, the social self, falling behind the living psyche. The silence in the mirror's mouth reveals that the old language no longer carries psychic energy, and the turning away is the final withdrawal of identification. You are no longer anchored in the image that once mediated your relationship with the world. The mirror becomes empty not because you have vanished, but because you are no longer living inside the reflection. This is profoundly disturbing to those who knew you primarily through that surface. Symbols multiply because language fails at this depth. The serpent appears not as temptation, but as heat. The serpent is the instinct that moves without apology, without justification. It sheds its skin not because it plans renewal, but because growth makes the old form untenable. When this symbol approaches consciousness, people around you grow uneasy. They sense that something in you is no longer governed by the old moral reflexes. This does not make you immoral. It makes you less available to manipulation through shame. Fire follows the serpent. Fire does not argue, it transforms. In psychological terms, fire is the energy that burns away the surplus identifications, the roles, the narratives, the obligations that once organized your sense of self. Fire is why explanations feel false now. To explain is to preserve form. Fire destroys form. When you stand near this inner fire, you do not feel inspired. You feel reduced. And in that reduction, something essential remains that no longer negotiates its existence. Then there is the sea at night. The sea is the unconscious when it no longer offers comfort. It is vast, indifferent, and rhythmic. To stand before it is to recognize that your psyche is not obligated to be comprehensible to others. The sea does not explain its tides. It does not apologize for its depth. It does not soften itself to be loved. When this symbol becomes active in you, you stop translating your inner movements into social reassurance. You allow others to not understand. This is experienced by them as abandonment, but it is, in truth, the end of an illusion that intimacy requires transparency at all times. What collapses next are roles, Roles are sustained by repetition and reward. When you stop rewarding others with access, the role loses its function. The good one, the strong one, the reasonable one, the empathic one all begin to decay. People continue to address you as if the role were intact, and are startled when the words land nowhere. They repeat the same appeals with increasing intensity, as if volume could substitute for relevance, but roles, once deprived of psychic energy, do not revive, they rot, and rot produces smell. This is why interactions suddenly feel sour, strained, or absurd. You are speaking from a different level of reality. At this stage, the old power attempts a final maneuver, inversion. You are accused of what was done to you. You are called controlling because you no longer yield. You are called distant because you no longer carry their emotions. You are called unsafe because you no longer prioritize their comfort over your truth. This inversion is a classic shadow reaction. The psyche, unable to face its own dependency and aggression, casts them onto the one who has withdrawn from the game. The accusation is meant to lure you back into defense. Defense would reopen access. You do not defend, and so the accusation hangs unanswered, revealing its emptiness. What is crucial to understand is that this shift in you did not begin with insight. It began with exhaustion. The psyche tolerates distortion until it cannot. When the cost of adaptation exceeds the cost of separation, the psyche chooses separation without consulting your ideals. This is why the change feels complete. You did not decide to be different. You discovered that you already were. The anger that once frightened you has become silent authority. The boundary that once felt cruel has become neutral fact. This is the danger of seeing what others don't once you see the mechanism's projection. Guilt exchange, unconscious contracts, you cannot unsee them, and when you stop participating, you expose them. Exposure does not heal them, it destabilizes them. Those who are willing to face their shadow may eventually approach you with humility. Those who are not will retreat, attack, or collapse. None of this is your task. The psyche that has crossed this threshold does not manage outcomes. It simply no longer lies to maintain belonging. What remains is a dangerous calm, not because it seeks danger, but because it no longer avoids it through self-betrayal. You are not protected by harmony anymore. You are protected by alignment, and alignment does not explain itself. It does not argue. It stands. What deepens now is not the conflict outside you, but the precision inside. The earlier turbulence belonged to the collapse of familiar exchanges. This next movement belongs to the psyche reorganizing itself without asking for permission. You notice that even when the outer world grows quieter, fewer messages, fewer confrontations, fewer attempts to pull you back, you do not feel relief in the ordinary sense. Instead, there is a heightened sobriety. You are no longer distracted by reaction, and so perception sharpens. You begin to see not only what others are doing, but how the entire pattern once lived inside you as well. It becomes evident that the old dynamic did not survive merely because others imposed it. It survived because part of you cooperated, not consciously, not cynically, but through a deep unconscious loyalty. There was a contract you never signed in words, but honored in behavior. I will remain accessible, understandable, emotionally available, and in exchange I will not be abandoned. This contract was forged early, often before language, when safety depended on attunement. To read the room was to survive it. To soften was to belong. To suppress anger was to remain loved. What now collapses is not simply an external system of power, but an internal vow that once kept you alive. This is why the present stillness feels heavy rather than triumphant. A vow has been broken, not by rebellion, but by maturation. The psyche has reached a stage where the old agreement no longer delivers what it promised. Belonging purchased through self-erasure becomes too expensive. And when such a vow dissolves, it does not dissolve cleanly, it releases grief. Not the grief of losing others, but the grief of recognizing how long you participated in your own diminishment without knowing it could be otherwise. Here, another dream may surface, one that carries less drama and more truth. You are standing in a public place, perhaps a train station or a wide stone hall. People pass you constantly, close enough to touch, yet none of them see you. You call out to one or two by name, but they do not turn. Your voice sounds normal to you, but it does not travel. Then you notice something strange. You are not distressed. You are simply observing. At the far end of the hall, there is an open doorway leading outside, into a landscape you cannot yet see. You do not rush toward it. You remain where you are, unseen, awake. This dream does not signify invisibility as injury. It signifies withdrawal of projection. You are no longer glowing with the psychic signals that invite others to locate themselves through you. When projection withdraws, attention follows it. People do not see you because they no longer see themselves in you. This absence is experienced by the ego as social disappearance, but by the psyche as liberation from function. You are no longer a surface, you are a center, and centers do not advertise themselves. At this level, the concept of the shadow becomes unavoidable, not as an abstract theory, but as lived reality. The shadow is not only what is dark, immoral, or aggressive, it is everything that was excluded to maintain a workable self-image. In your case, what was excluded was not cruelty but refusal, not violence but finality, not hatred but the right to say no without explanation. These elements were judged incompatible with goodness, with love, with being the kind of person you are, and so they were buried. Yet buried elements do not disappear. They wait, and when they return, they do not ask to be justified. What others call your coldness is, in truth, the end of internal contradiction. You are no longer smiling while resenting. You are no longer agreeing while withdrawing internally. You are no longer present in body while absent in soul. This congruence feels severe to those who benefited from your division. They preferred you split, agreeable on the surface, exhausted underneath. The integrated psyche is intolerable to a system built on your inner conflict, because it removes leverage. Here, the symbol of the locked door deepens. Earlier, it represented the end of access. Now it represents something subtler, the end of negotiation. A boundary that requires explanation is still porous. It can be debated, challenged, worn down. A boundary that exists as structure is not personal. It does not argue, it simply redirects reality. This is why you do not feel the urge to justify yourself anymore. The impulse has not been suppressed, it has become irrelevant. Explanation belongs to a phase where identity was still relationally negotiated. You have crossed beyond that phase. This crossing often brings a disturbing clarity about certain relationships. You see how closeness was sustained through your silence about what you perceived. You see how harmony depended on your willingness to overlook small violations, emotional, psychological, sometimes even moral. You see how affection was often offered not as meeting, but as a reward for compliance. This realization does not produce rage, it produces distance. Rage still seeks engagement. Distance marks completion. Another symbol emerges here, the labyrinth again. But now, from above, earlier, you were inside it, moving through confusion. Now you see its shape. You recognize patterns, how certain conversations always circled back to your responsibility. How certain people only approached you when they needed regulation. How certain conflicts could never be resolved because resolution would remove their advantage. Seeing the labyrinth from above does not free you from it instantly, but it frees you from believing that getting lost was your fault. With this vision comes an unexpected loneliness, not the loneliness of abandonment, but the loneliness of asymmetry. You are no longer in the same psychological position as many around you, not superior, but elsewhere. You are not invested in maintaining the illusions that make certain bonds possible, and bonds built on illusion cannot survive clarity. This is why some relationships simply fade without drama. There is nothing to fight over once the unconscious bargain has dissolved. The silence becomes mutual. The withdrawal is no longer resisted. The structure quietly collapses. At this depth, you may notice something unsettling in yourself, a lack of urgency to replace what has been lost. There is no frantic search for new intimacy, no immediate rebuilding. This absence is often misinterpreted as numbness. It is not numbness. It is a psyche recalibrating its economy of energy. For a long time, energy flowed outward, monitoring, adjusting, repairing, anticipating. Now it flows inward, not in self-absorption, but in consolidation. You are gathering yourself back from the places you once dispersed yourself to remain acceptable. This is where the symbol of fire returns, but differently. Earlier, fire burned roles. Now it forges structure. Fire hardens what was once pliable. Your values are no longer situational. Your yes and no longer depend on atmosphere. This does not make you rigid, it makes you coherent. Coherence is often mistaken for severity by those who thrived on your flexibility. But flexibility without center is submission. The psyche, having tasted center, does not volunteer to dissolve again. You may also notice that your anger, now integrated, has lost its narrative. You are not angry about specific events anymore. The anger has done its work. It has withdrawn energy from false arrangements. What remains is firmness, and firmness does not need memory to sustain itself. It does not revisit old scenes to justify its existence. It simply stands in the present and refuses what no longer aligns. This is the moment when the old identity truly collapses, not because you reject it, but because it no longer answers to your inner reality. You cannot convincingly play the role of the endlessly understanding one when understanding has been replaced by clarity. You cannot convincingly perform openness when openness has been redefined. To reopen yourself in the old way would feel like lying not to others, but to yourself, and the psyche that has crossed this threshold treats self-deception as a kind of violence. Others may still wait for you to return. They may interpret your distance as a phase, a mood, a reaction that will pass. They may believe that with enough time, pressure, or tenderness, the old version of you will reappear. This belief is not malicious, it is hopeful, but it is hope rooted in the past. You know something they do not yet know. The door they are waiting at no longer leads anywhere. The room behind it has been dismantled. This is not a victory, it is not framed as empowerment, it is simply a fact of psychic development. When individuation advances beyond a certain point, the self can no longer be organized primarily around others' needs, perceptions, or expectations. The center shifts, and when the center shifts, gravity changes. Those who orbited you because you were empty enough to accommodate them lose their orbit. They drift, some collide with others, some disappear. This is not punishment, it is physics. What you are integrating now is not knowledge but inevitability, the understanding that this movement cannot be reversed without fragmentation. You could perform closeness again, but it would be hollow. You could explain again, but the words would feel dead. You could reopen yourself, but only by severing the connection to the part of you that has awakened, and the psyche will not willingly sacrifice its own integrity for belonging once it has tasted wholeness. This is the dangerous calm taking root, not the calm of resolution, but the calm of irreversibility. The sea at night does not promise safety, but it does promise truth, and you are standing before it, not seeking reassurance, not demanding meaning, simply recognizing that something essential has already happened and that life, from this point forward, will organize itself around that fact. There is a final tightening that occurs when the psyche no longer oscillates between the old world and the new one. It is not dramatic, it is almost disappointing in its simplicity. The conflict does not climax, it evaporates. What remains is a quiet, irreversible shift in orientation. You notice that even when circumstances would once have pulled you back, nostalgia, guilt, shared history, the soft pressure of expectation, nothing inside you moves, not in resistance, not in defiance. Nothing moves because there is nothing left to negotiate. This is where the danger of seeing what others don't completes itself. Earlier, perception disturbed relationships, then it dismantled roles, now it dismantles hope specifically. The hope that things could return to an earlier configuration without cost. Hope, at this stage, becomes a form of denial. Others may still hope that you will explain, soften, reassure, or clarify. You recognize this hope immediately, not because it is spoken, but because it carries the old tone, a waiting, a hovering, an emotional hand held just close enough to touch you again. And for the first time, that hope does not stir you. This absence of response is not cruelty. It is structural. The psyche has completed a movement that cannot be undone by sentiment. What once required effort holding boundaries, restraining explanation, tolerating misunderstanding now requires nothing. You are not withholding. There is simply nothing extending outward anymore. This is the point at which others begin to sense that the separation is not situational but ontological. You are not temporarily unavailable. You are no longer located where they are looking. Here, a final dream sometimes arrives, spare and unmistakable. You are standing before a door you recognize as one you used to pass through freely. On the other side, you can hear voices familiar, animated, alive with the rhythms of the past. You reach for the handle out of habit. Not longing, the door opens easily. Inside, everything is as it was. The same conversations, the same emotional exchanges, the same subtle tensions disguised as warmth. You stand in the doorway for a moment, fully able to enter, and then you realize that if you do, you will have to become smaller again, not dramatically, just enough. You close the door gently, without anger, without ceremony, and walk away. There is no fear in the dream, only finality. This dream is not about rejection, it is about incompatibility. The old space still exists, others can inhabit it. You are simply no longer its inhabitant. This is why there is no impulse to argue, to convince, to justify. Argument assumes a shared reality. Convincing assumes mutual investment. Justification assumes doubt. None of these conditions remain. You are not certain in the ideological sense. You are settled in the structural sense. The psyche has chosen where it stands, and it no longer consults memory to confirm the decision. At this depth, the symbol of the mirror completes its work. Earlier, the mirror fractured, delayed, or emptied. Now it disappears entirely. You are no longer watching yourself being seen. You are no longer adjusting yourself to your own image. This is profoundly unsettling for those who knew you primarily through reflection, through how you mirrored their needs, moods, and self-concepts. Without the mirror, they cannot locate themselves in relation to you. And without that orientation, they experience vertigo. The labyrinth also resolves, not by revealing a path, but by ceasing to matter. You are no longer inside it, and you are no longer mapping it. You have exited the need to understand the pattern exhaustively. Understanding has given way to recognition. Recognition does not require explanation. It simply knows where not to stand anymore. This is the moment when the collapse of old power becomes complete. Power that depended on access, guilt, obligation, and readability cannot function without participation. You are no longer participating not as protest, but as fact. Your emotional surface no longer yields information. Your silence no longer invites interpretation. Your presence no longer offers leverage, and so power reorganizes elsewhere. It leaves you, not because you pushed it away, but because there is nothing left for it to attach to. Others may interpret this as abandonment, indifference, or even punishment. But punishment seeks reaction. Indifference seeks avoidance. What has occurred in you seeks neither. It is closer to gravity than to emotion. Gravity does not explain why it pulls. It simply does. Your boundary now operates at that level. It does not respond to appeal. It does not soften under pressure. It does not require reinforcement. It exists. Here, the integration of the shadow reaches its quiet conclusion. The anger that once lived in repression has been fully absorbed into structure. It no longer needs expression. It no longer needs justification. It has become boundary. And because it is boundary, it no longer feels like anger at all. It feels like alignment. This is why you do not feel righteous. You do not feel victorious. You feel precise. Precision is not warm. It is not cold. It is exact. Relationships that cannot tolerate this exactness fall away without drama. There is no final conversation, no definitive rupture. They simply lose relevance. The psychic thread that once connected you dissolves because it is no longer being fed from your side. This is often the most misunderstood aspect of the process. People expect endings to be loud. They expect explanations, confrontation, declarations, but individuation at this level does not announce itself. It withdraws energy and lets structures collapse on their own. What remains is not isolation, but solitude of a particular kind, not the solitude of exile, but the solitude of standing on ground that belongs to you. This ground is not comforting. It does not promise ease, but it is stable. You are no longer balancing yourself on others' expectations, interpretations, or emotional needs. You are standing on your own psychic weight. This is the final reframe, and it is not gentle. You have not become distant from others. You have become unreachable by what no longer aligns with your inner reality. You have not closed yourself off. You have closed a chapter of participation that required your self-fragmentation. You have not withdrawn love. You have withdrawn illusion. There is no return to the old arrangement. Not because you forbid it, but because the psyche no longer recognizes it as home. To go back would require forgetting what you now see, and seeing, once completed, does not reverse itself. The danger of seeing what others don't is that you lose the ability to live comfortably inside shared illusions. But what you gain is something far less negotiable and far more consequential. You gain a self that no longer needs to explain why it exists. The calm that settles now is not hopeful. It is not optimistic. It is closed, finished, and exact. A circle has ended, not ceremonially, structurally, and from this point forward, whatever enters your life will have to meet you where you are, not where you once made yourself available to be used, interpreted, or possessed.